The Revival Initiative was the single most ambitious project in the history of the American government. The program's footprint was supermassive, taking up an impressive part of Nevada's desert. But the size of the facilities hardly mattered in comparison to the purpose of the enterprise. The Revival Initiative was the place where dozens of time travel portals were built and installed. The portals were big enough to pass gigantic containers through them. This was all done as a last resource to save the dying world. With most of the Earth's natural resources running out, essential animal species fading away, and the entire situation too dire to be fixed, and the only option was to bring in resources elsewhere. The exploration of outer space proved unsuccessful, but the creation of a time travel machine worked. And after the first scientists went back in time to bring a bottle of water, a perfectly good apple, and a living bird, the solution was found. Nowadays, the time travel portals work 24/7. The workers of the Revival Initiative bring in containers filled to the brim with food, water, and extinct species and spread them around our desperate world. The staff traveled a dozen years back, then a few decades, 100 years, and then another, and another. It looked like bringing in resources this way could last forever. And maybe humanity was saved, as long as the initiative never stopped working. As long as there weren't mistakes, tragedies, catastrophes too big to handle. What were the odds that the scientists' greatest fears would come true? Who would have thought that the world's salvation would invite an even bigger and more violent ruin? The chaos started with portal number 16. The station was in charge of Doctors Patricia Rivera and Raul Menet. The operations were running smoothly, one container after the other. They pass the portal, they get scanned, they are preliminary tested, they are double-checked, they are approved for distribution. The water's purity was analyzed, the fruits and vegetables were evaluated, and the animals spent a period of quarantine in their designated area. Every container came and went accompanied by a smaller one, filled with the necessary staff and tools to collect what they're looking for. Every container, except for container number 9478. Something's wrong. Raul was the first one to announce. The stats on his computer showed that the next water container came first, when the workers were supposed to cross the portal ahead. It was late, the night shift would begin soon, and the sun was starting to set. It can happen, right? Patricia said, but immediately sent the order to stop container 9478 for an emergency checkup as soon as it passed through the portal. Both doctors attended personally to the examination of the vessel. They climbed the stairs and stood tall on the platform, along with 10 members of their team, as they opened a small hatch on the lid of the container. All at once, confusion and fear sparked within the scientists. The man that opened the hatch recoiled quickly and threw up right there on top of the vessel. Bruh! The others didn't get it. They only saw darkness underneath. None of the sparkling clear water it was supposed to be filled with. Then, the awfully rotten smell reached them, and all of them gagged. Open up the container completely, Raul ordered. The workers of the portal rushed to follow the instructions, but everyone would regret the man's decision. As soon as the crane completely lifted the container's lid, the dozen people standing on the platform reacted harshly. Panic sparked. Chaos took hold. It was the beginning of the end. What? 3 of them threw up. 1 of them fainted. The rest screamed in horror. 1 of them yelled and stumbled backwards, desperate to get away from the disturbing scene. So desperate, he missed the first step of the stairs. He yelled even louder as he started falling down and down they could go of 3 flights of stairs. His body reached the ground in a lifeless heap. Container 9478 hadn't yet fully revealed its contents. and it had taken its first victim of the 21st century. The water inside the vessel was darkened, and on the surface were 10 human bodies floating lifelessly, some of them dismembered into several pieces. All that blood, their organs, and upon further inspection, small and big fishes were also decomposing on the surface of the water. Brought back from? When is the shipment from? Patricia yelled, still trying to cover her nose from the disgusting smell. Our oldest one yet, Bro replied through a coughing fit. 3,000 years. What happened? The woman wondered, with tears glistening in her eyes. Was it sorrow? Nausea? Frustration? It definitely should have been fear. Before her partner could reply, all the poor witnesses were forced to stare again at the perturbing scene inside a container. The water wasn't still anymore. The dead bodies were starting to sway. Bubbles started to emanate from the water as the surface grew more and more agitated. Everyone heard a deep groan from the depths of the container. Then, they were stunned to see the huge vessel start to shake. Something inside was moving, something big and strong enough to make a giant metallic box filled with water shake furiously. The workers couldn't hold back anymore. They all started screaming as they descended from the platform, taking the stairs two at a time and pushing each other in their hurry to find safety. Meanwhile, the container trembled more and more. The water started to spill from the edges. Something inside was knocking aggressively against its walls. It wouldn't hold on for much longer. When Dr. Patricia Rivera had that thought, she gripped her partner's arm and pulled him back. He struggled at first, but then both of them tried to retain as many of their co-workers as possible. They held the railings of the platform stairs and waited, holding their breath. 1 more second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then the great explosion. One of the container's walls snapped. The pressure from the water inside sent it flying away, and it was enough to make the other 3 walls fall as well. Everything and everyone that didn't end up crushed by the heavy metal walls then had to face the tons and tons of dirty, contaminated water, rushing with full speed and force in all directions. Scientists, workers, and innocent people were crushed, drowned, dragged away with brutal force to their early demise. Meanwhile, dead fish, human corpses, dirt, and waste moved along with the water. It was enough to make the survivors sob and gag in disgust by merely watching. When the shock of the explosion of water was barely over, and the very relative calm that followed, one thing remained, unbothered and impressive. At the bottom of the remnants of the container that brought it to the present, it was some kind of huge mammalian creature, bigger than anything alive nowadays, bigger even than most things found in history and science books. Parts of it resembled a whale, like its tail and flukes, its dorsal fin, and its blowhole. It spit a massive burst of water from it, causing a heavy rain to fall all around it for a few seconds. Dr. Raoul Bennett took a seat on the stairs. He was shaking violently, and he couldn't believe his eyes. His colleague, Dr. Patricia Rivera, couldn't move. She could hardly breathe, and she was desperately wishing this was a nightmare. Only 2 members of their team stood on the stairs with them. The others were lost to the torrent of water, probably dead. Distantly, their disturbed minds registered the sound of emergency alarms all around them. The night was falling fast. The water had damaged the electricity, and the darkness made it all much worse. From the section of the facility designated for the study, treatment, and handling of animals brought from the past, came a team of experienced zookeepers, carrying the biggest, most powerful sedatives they had. They looked like terrified little ants. The beast, the unknown creature, opened its giant jaws and made a roaring noise like 100 lions. The zookeepers trembled. One ran away. Two dropped their guns. The rest of them started shooting. A few managed to aim at its open mouth, but most of the darts hit its impenetrable hull and fell uselessly to the ground. With the agility of a lizard, the creature rushed forward with open jaws and took one of the zookeepers in its mouth, snapping the body in half. Everyone nearby ran away. Everyone watching from a safe distance averted their eyes. The doctors in charge of the portal were now mesmerized. Que rica! This is the most horrendous but fascinating creature I have ever seen, Patricia mumbled. We brought it here, Raoul told her. We brought it here, and now it's ours. Nobody has known this thing before us. This is our chance. Look, Patricia interrupted him. After the demise of the zookeepers, it was the turn of the security guards of the facility. They didn't care about the science behind any of it. They were only members of the military, and they only listened to orders. They stood in line, prepared their guns, and fired at the creature. No! Both scientists yelled in unison and finally started moving in. They rushed down the stairs, ran over the puddles, jumped over body parts and machinery alike. They only stopped running when everybody also stopped moving. The creature had opened its jaws again and roared. Then it rushed forward. This time, it took two men on its great mouth and chewed as it ran away. The soldiers kept shooting. The scientists kept running. The reinforcements arrived, and the helicopters started hovering above them. Someone powerful somewhere must have had the same plot as the doctors. At one point, the soldiers stopped shooting, and a massive net fell over the creature. The net didn't neutralize it completely, but confused it enough to give time for the reinforcements to arrive and the military to handle the situation. It felt like the Great Terror was over, with enough sedatives to maim a dozen elephants. The creature was put to sleep. Many soldiers were working on tying it up and preparing it for transport so it could be studied in the lab. Doctors Patricia Rivera and Raoul Bennett watched from a close distance. Their lab coats were wet, stained with dirt and blood and muck. It's not a monster, Patricia sighed. It's a living creature, and it's up to us to study it, to understand it. And what happened? Under the dim emergency lights around them, the pair of scientists noticed something was off. One of the soldiers went missing. Then, one of them crouched down and didn't get back up. Finally, a third one fell backward. And everyone screamed. As the chaos started to spread again, the scientists stumbled backward and looked around. But everything was so dark. The blinking red lights only made it all worse. Those sparks in the ground were just a reflection on the puddles, they thought. Those couldn't be gleaming fangs and claws. They couldn't. But that's when the wolf fell down and yelled in pain. Patricia looked down at him, then looked at his leg and saw a miniature creature that was biting him. It looked like the humongous creature, but a smaller version, a baby version of this monster in front of them. Patricia started yelling and running away, but she stumbled down. She had stumbled over another baby monster. And as she realized there was no escape, she looked around, frightened. There could be a dozen more of those monsters scattered around the entire facility. Carried over by the water they brought back from 3,000 years ago.